So when I look at traumatic stress on the nervous system, because I'm a trauma therapist, what I see is that naturally during the day, our nervous system activates and settles. And yet when a traumatic event or a reminder of a traumatic event that happened in the past happens, then our nervous system bounces into this area known as the sympathetic branch of the nervous system. That's that fight, flight, freeze, or into the dorsal branch of the nervous system. That's the collapse, flop, feign death. But it does this in service of survival. So when the nervous system ricochets upwards into sympathetic, it's like this reminder of unsafety and danger happens. I need to get into action about this. And yet our nervous system can get stuck on, or our nervous system says conserve energy in order to survive and can get stuck on off. And yet when it's stuck on, what happens is our nervous system is in this state of hypervigilance, hypersensitivity, avoidance, right? Intrusive thoughts. We've got looping thoughts. I can't stop thinking. And if I stop thinking, then something bad might happen. So then I got to think 10 things ahead and think about all the possible permutations and combinations about the 5 things that I'm juggling on my plate at the moment. I'm pre-living and reliving my life. I'm pre-doing and redoing my life. And I'm pre-feeling and I'm re-feeling my life. And we may experience some of the following emotions: anxiety, panic, fear, rage, or terror. When I'm down here, I'm in hypoarousal. So it's feeling flat. I'm in the conservation of resources in order to survive. Numb, shut down, hyposensitive, no energy, hopelessness, helplessness, futility, impotence, shame, despair, defeat. Why bother? And yet it's in service of survival that I'm conserving my resources. And yet for some of us, we're moving through the world, our nervous system is doing great, and then something happens and I'm wired and or I'm tired. I'm stuck on or I'm stuck on off, or I'm ricocheting back and forth between the two. Things may settle, but then something else happens. And now this can be an acute event. And as a trauma therapist, I feel that we get hyper-focused on the acute events, and what can happen when we look at a holistic view of trauma is that it can be traumatic stress or simply stress, that it's too much or too little of something for too long without adequate resources, resourcing, or time, space, permission, or protection in order for the nervous system to return to homeostasis. And yet in order to do that, what some of us do is we isolate in our rooms, close the door, and hope the world goes away. And so we can then pendulate back and forth between, it's all too much, hide from the world, and then bing, bing, boom, boom, bang, let's make everything happen. And then I retreat back into my world. And then we try and meditate, and what happens is that I'm sitting here with my nervous system up here or my nervous system down here. And if my nervous system's down here, then I very quickly can fall asleep, or disconnect or dissociate. And if my nervous system's up here, it can be actually very, as a therapist, meditation, like mindfulness meditation, is contraindicated for someone who's experiencing a heightened bout of anxiety, manicness, depression, as well as in the throes of a PTSD flashback. It has to be specifically guided, because being present to your anxiety can provoke or induce even more anxiety. And so learning about the window of capacity, which I love that Rose has been sharing with you, is being able to recognize when I'm in too much energy, when I've crossed a threshold and I'm in survival mode where I'm in that fight, flight, freeze, recognizing when I'm in too little energy, right? The lights are on, but no one's home. It's all too much anyway. Why bother? It'll all be over soon. We're all going to die anyway. When I've crossed that threshold into survival mode of hypoarousal, where I have zero energy. I am in energy conservation, and it feels even more depleting of the energy I don't have in order to make things happen in my life. And yet I know that when I'm in optimal energy, I have the capacity to feel safe and social and engaged. I have capacities. I have capacities to think and feel simultaneously without overwhelm. I have capacities for self-reflection and perspective taking, for empathy and patience and compassion. I have capacities for connection to self and others, and it doesn't feel overwhelming. It doesn't feel like an either-or proposition. I have the capacity for curiosity and wonder and imagination and awe. And when I'm in this optimal energy place, mindfulness meditation, or rather mindfulness as a way of being and moving through the world, naturally emerges and naturally arises. If I'm sort of up here at the edges of my window, mindfulness meditation can be helpful to bring me back in. If I'm down here in my window, mindfulness meditation may be helpful to normalize getting off of the hamster wheel of needing to be constantly busy and doing something. And yet, if we're not resourced enough, then what can happen is if I'm down here in my nervous system, I can go blue. Like, yeah, because my nervous system is actually saying to me, I need to rest. I have a very narrow window. And if I'm down here and I'm not resourced with the mindfulness cues that our meditation teachers offer to us, which I'll offer shortly, then it's very easy for the body to make the shape of collapse. And then I'm very quickly asleep. Yeah. I notice here, if my students and my clients are here, if they've come back down into the window, then their posture is one where the head is over the shoulders and the shoulders is over the heart, over the center line. And yet it's these little micro movements. If the head is forward like this, I know that you're in your head, you're in your thoughts. If the entire torso is leaning forward, you're in the go, 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 let's get something done, right? Part of the body. It's of the nervous system. It's reflecting in the body. Yeah. If I'm seeing micro movements through the mouth, through the tongue, through the eyes, it's that sense of, yes, there's some thinking going on. And so it's these mindfulness cues, it's these mindfulness anchors that can help set us up for success. And yet it's that state creates story. So we'll dive into the nervous system a little bit more, but I'm hoping that I'm sharing about the context of the window of capacity in such a way that you can begin to see your own meditation practice in here. That the meditation practice isn't about being a good meditator. That the meditation practice is the ability to meet yourself where you're at with compassion and non-judgment. And if the practice for me today is recognizing, here I am with my anxiety, or here I am with my looping thoughts, here I am with my hyperfixation on the outcome of tomorrow's whatever, then I can meet myself with some compassion around that. Yeah, because mindfulness without heartfulness can be intentional torture. And mindfulness without the skills of self-regulation can also be intentional torture. We don't meditate in order to be good meditators. We meditate in order to be able to meet ourselves where we're at. And yet to be able to meditate in a group space, we need to be able to experience relative safety and relative connection in relative stillness. And so this is the trauma-informed aspect of mindfulness practice. If there has been stillness in terror, if there has been stillness in fear or in rage or in panic, then it's a challenge for many of us to then experience stillness in safety. When there has been terror, right, when there has been stillness in terror, rage, panic, fear, with other people around, then it's going to be a challenge to experience relative safety and relative connection while in a silent, still meditation practice. And I hope to normalize this, that there's nothing wrong with you if you've been attending meditation classes and as soon as the meditation practice is over, you're looking for the exit and you're wanting to leave the room. Oh. Because this stillness here isn't the stillness of, of the lights are on but nobody's home. The stillness here can actually be the stillness of high freeze. And when I'm in high freeze, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of nervous system energy going on. And when I'm in high freeze, there's only two places to go. I can go into flop, dissociate, collapse, or dissociate, check out. This will all be over soon. And as soon as I'm awake here online, then there's a lot of unpotentiated survival energy in the nervous system. I go into fight or flight. And for the most part, these are the people who at the end of meditation class, straight out the door. And chances are these are the folks who sit near the door so that as soon as class is over, they're out of here. Yeah. And so to recognize that we need to titrate the meditation practice. We need to titrate the silent, still meditation practice for many of us. And to begin to expand conceptually meditation to involve moving, to involve dancing, to involve seated movement, so that we can begin to move towards the idea of the possibility of relative stillness in relative safety and relative connection. One of the things that I would share in addiction recovery is, are you unsafe or are you uncomfortable? Yeah. And that right there is the practice of discernment. It's the practice of applied mindfulness. It's that pause to check in. Am I unsafe or am I uncomfortable? And then to check in for my cues of safety. And so this is where I invite you to have a look out your window. All corners of your window. To notice the route between you and your exits. And to notice all the exits in your space. To have a look behind you in such a way that you're twisting the torso. And then have a look behind you in the other direction. Twisting the torso. to notice the space above you, and to notice the space in front of you, the space below you. Notice what emerges for you in this moment. And this is something that I do for myself regularly, because for many of us, the override is, I know that there's no trauma cognitively, and yet our bodies still hold the need to know where the exits are, the need to check who's behind us. And yet, if you in your ancestry have ever needed to run for your life, checking who's behind you is not an option. Checking, because that right there might have cause for you to be caught. And yet the very act of checking behind you can break that piece that says, am I unsafe or am I uncomfortable? Well, if I'm looking behind me, then clearly I'm safe enough to look behind me, so that the terror of running for my life isn't actually real in this moment.